Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. Today, I want to take you to the fall of 1862 to the White House in Washington, D.C. We are between the Peninsula Campaign that did not go well for the Union Army. The On to Richmond slogan was never followed through with actions. And we were coming up, unbeknownst to everyone, on the disaster that happened at Fredericksburg, Virginia. That was in December of 1862. So here we are in the fall, and Abraham Lincoln is in the White House. There's a lot of crowds around. It's visiting day for the public, and one of the visitors happens to be an aide to Major General Henry W. Halleck. The aide's name is Charles Graham Halpine, and he had enjoyed a pre-war career as a journalist at top newspapers in the United States. He had also written a wildly popular series of Civil War articles under the pseudonym Miles O'Reilly, the fictitious infantry private from Ireland. Halpine, in short, was a celebrity. He also did his part for the Army when he became an aide to Halleck. This position as an aide allowed him access to top military and political leaders of the country, which placed him in position to meet Abraham Lincoln on at least a couple of occasions. He recalled this particular meeting, again in the fall of 1862, in Halpine's 1866 memoirs with the comical title, at least comical by 19th century standards, Baked Meats of the Funeral. I want to read the passage to you now because in it, Lincoln waxes on a serious subject, the possibilities of assassination. So here we go. Here's Halpine's words. He writes, in the fall of 1862, the writer of this article, being then a member of the staff of General Halleck, had frequent occasion to wait upon our recently deceased president, both during official hours and at other times. Once, on what was called a public day, when Mr. Lincoln received all applicants in their turn, the writer was much struck by observing as he passed through the corridor the heterogeneous crowd of men and women representing all ranks and classes who were gathered in the large waiting room outside the presidential suite of offices. Being ushered into the president's chamber by Major Hay, that's John Hay, the private secretary, the first thing he saw was Mr. Lincoln bowing an elderly lady out of the door, the president's remarks to her being, as she still lingered and appeared reluctant to go, "I am really very sorry, madam, very sorry. But your own good sense must tell you that I am not here to collect small debts. You must appeal to the courts in regular order." When she was gone, Mr. Lincoln sat down, crossed his legs, locked his hands over his knees, and commenced to laugh, this being his favorite attitude when much amused. "What odd kinds of people come in to see me," he said, "and what odd ideas they must have about my office. Would you believe, Major Halpine, that the old lady who has just left came in here to get from me an order for stopping the pay of a treasury clerk who owes her a board bill of about $70. And the president rocked himself backward and forward, then appeared intensely amused. "She may have come here a loyal woman," continued Mr. Lincoln, "but I'll be bound she has gone away believing that the worst pictures of me in the Richmond press only lack truth in not being half black and bad enough." This led to a somewhat general conversation in which I expressed surprise that he did not adopt the plan in force at all military headquarters, under which every applicant to see the general commanding had to be filtered through a sieve of officers, assistant adjutant generals, and so forth, who allowed none in to take up the general's time, save such as they were satisfied had business of sufficient importance and which could be transacted in no other manner than by a personal interview. Of every 100 people who come to see me, the general in chief daily, I explained, not 10 have any sufficient business with him, nor are they admitted. On being asked to explain for what purpose they desire to see him and stating it, it is found in 9 cases out of 10 that the business properly belongs to someone of other of the subordinate bureau. They are often then referred, as the case may be, to the quartermaster, commissary, medical, adjutant general, or other departments, with an assurance that, even if they saw the general in chief, he could do nothing more for them than give them the same direction. With these points courteously explained, I added, they go away quite content, although refused admittance. Ah, yes, said Mr. Lincoln gravely, and his words on this matter are important as illustrating a rule of his action and, to some extent perhaps, the essentially representative character of his mind and of his administration. Ah, yes, such things do very well for you military people, but your arbitrary rule in your camps. But the office of the president is essentially a civil one, and the affair is very different. For myself, I feel, though the tax on my time is heavy, that no hours of my day are better employed than those which thus bring me again within the direct contact and atmosphere of the average of our whole people. Men moving only in official circle are apt to become merely official, not to say arbitrary in their ideas, and are apter and apter with each passing day to forget that they only hold power in a representative capacity. Now, this is all wrong. I go into these promiscuous receptions of all who claim to have business with me twice each week, and every applicant for audience has to take his turn as if waiting to be shaved in the barber shop. Many of the matters brought to my notice are utterly frivolous, but others are of more or less importance, and all serve to renew in me a clearer and more vivid image of that great popular assemblage out of which I sprang, and to which, at the end of 2 years, I must return. Remember, he had 2 more years to go on his presidency. I tell you, Major, he said, appearing at this point to recollect I was in the room, for the former part of these remarks had been made with half-shut eyes, as if in soliloquy. I tell you that I call these receptions my public opinion baths, for I have but little time to read the papers and gather public opinion that way, and though they may not be pleasant in all their particulars, the effect as a whole is renovating and invigorating to my perceptions of responsibility and duty. It would never do for a president to have guards with drawn sabers at his door, as if he fancied he were, or were trying to be, or were assuming to be an emperor. This remark about guards with drawn sabers at his door called my attention afresh to what I had remarked to myself almost every time I entered the White House, both then and since, and to which I had frequently called the attention both of Major Hay and General Halleck. The utterly unprotected condition of the president's person, and the fact that any assassin or maniac seeking his life could enter his presence without the interference of a single armed man to hold him back. The entrance doors and all doors on the official side of the building were open all hours of the day and very late into the evening, and I have many times entered the mansion and walked up to the rooms of the 2 private secretaries as late as 9 or 10 o'clock at night without seeing or being challenged by a single soul. There were indeed 2 attendants, one for the outer door and the other for the door of the official chambers, but these, thinking, I suppose, that none would call after office hours save persons who were personally acquainted or had the right of official entry, were not unfrequently somewhat remiss in their duties. To this fact, I now ventured to call the president's attention, saying that to me, perhaps from my European education, it appeared a deliberate courting of danger, even if the country were in a state of the profoundest peace, for the person at the head of the nation to remain so unprotected. Even granting, Mr. Lincoln, I said, that no assassin should seek your life, the large number of lunatics always in a community and always larger in times like these, and the tendency which insanity has to strike at shiny objects, or whomsoever is most talked about should lead, I submit, to some guards about the place and to some permanent officers with the power and duty of questioning all who seek to enter. To this, I added some brief sketch of the all but innumerable crazy letters and projects which were continually being received at General Halleck's headquarters, and which he had one day laughingly turned over to me on the ground that I now and then wrote verses. There are two dangers, therefore, I wound up saying: the danger of deliberate political assassination and the mere brute violence of insanity. Mr. Lincoln had heard me with a smile, his hands still locked across his knees and his body still rocking back and forth, the common indication that he was amused. Now, as to political assassination, he said, do you think the Richmond people would like to have Hannibal Hamlin, that's Lincoln's first vice president, here better than myself? In that one alternative, I have an insurance on my life worth half the prairie land of Illinois. And besides, this more gravely, if there were such a plot and they wanted to get at me, no vigilance could keep them out. We are so mixed up in our affairs that no matter what the system established, a conspiracy to assassinate, if such there were, could easily obtain a pass to see me for any one or more of its instruments. To betray fear of this by placing guards and so forth would only be to put the idea into their heads and perhaps lead to the very result it was intended to prevent. As to the crazy folks, Major, why, I must only take my chances, the worst crazy people I at present fear being some of my own too zealous adherents. That there may be such dangers as you and many others have suggested to me is quite possible. But I guess it wouldn't improve things any to publish that we were afraid of them in advance. At this point, the president turned to the papers I had brought over for his signature and, signing them, handed them to me with some message for General Halleck. Whereupon I bowed myself out, and the stream of omnium gatherum humanity from the waiting rooms again commenced flowing in upon him, sometimes in individual, sometimes in deputational or collective waves. The whole interview I have here narrated, though taking so much longer to tell, had probably not endured over 10 or 15 minutes, and it was the first, although not the only time, that I heard Mr. Lincoln discuss the possibility of an attempt to assassinate him. So there you have a lens on history, a view from Lincoln told by Charles Halpine in 1866, recalling this conversation 4 years earlier in the fall of 1862, when Lincoln talked about the idea of assassination and how having protection would only advertise the fact that he was more or less inviting people to harm him. So it was a different time, the 19th century. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail.